In the book of Isaiah, you have a time where Isaiah is God's prophet there, and it's during the time of King Ahaz. Ahaz was king for about 16 years here, and Ahaz was a horrible king. He was horribly immoral, involved in all kinds of idol worship and false gods and all kinds of stuff. And because of some of his decisions that he had made, certainly spiritual decisions as well, he had led the direction of God's people in a horrible way as well. They were turning their backs on God, things were a mess, and so God was using Isaiah to try and get them back going in the right direction. And so through Isaiah, God is trying to teach Ahaz to have some perspective on the situation that he was in here. You see, the situation was this. You had two kings from other nations that were coming together that were going to destroy him. You have King Rezin from Aram, and you have King Pekah from Israel. And these guys, he'd already faced 2 attacks from these guys before. And Pekah had taken 120,000 in one night from him, plus 200,000 captives as well. And then Rezin took a bunch of captives back to Damascus. And so these were 2 powerful nations that were coming his way, and so he would have been pretty freaked out. And so because of that, God wanted to be sure that he had the right perspective on what was going on here, because he wasn't including God into this challenge, or God's perspective into this challenge as well. So God says these 2 kings are nothing to fear, right? He calls them 2 smoldering stubs of wood. So what does that mean? I mean, it means that they're has-beens, they're nobodies, they're burnouts, they're no longer useful. The bottom line is, from God's perspective, they're nothing to fear. But to be fair to Ahaz, there's no way that he would have seen them this way. And that was God's point. God wanted him to have the right perspective on this. You know, I got to tell you, that really hits home. You know, for every one of us, we're going to face challenges and difficulties throughout our life that are just scary or downright terrifying. However, a big part of us being able to succeed at these challenges is that we see it really well. Now, I want to help illustrate that for you with optics, right? So these are binoculars, and this is my spotting scope. Now, if you're a hunter, you know all about these things. You know, you take these out, you look through this, and it brings the far really close that you can see, you know, mountainsides and stuff like that better when you're looking for deer or elk or whatever it is that you're hunting with that, you know. And they can be really advantageous in that because they help you see a long way very clearly. However, there is a problem with them as well, and that is their limited field of view. Let me show you what I mean. If you look through a spotting scope, this is kind of what you see here. Now, if you're looking through here, you know, and this is all you can see, yet you miss this, if you're not careful, that's a big bummer. Now, if you're a hunter, I know that's a bit of an exaggeration because you're not missing that buck right there. He's too close. But you get the picture, right? That's my point. Guys, when it comes to challenges that we're going to face, we have to learn to trust that our limited field of view is something that kind of hinders us as we're going through that. But we have to understand that God has that bigger picture view. He can see the whole thing. It's not limited to him, and that can be so helpful to us. See, the reason this hits home for me is this. One of the biggest challenges that I've faced in my entire life is when our first daughter passed away from brain cancer. She was diagnosed at the age of 2. We fought it for 2 years, and she passed away at the age of 4. You see, all the way through that situation, it was imperative that I recognized that I had a limited field of view on that situation, but that God didn't. That I could trust that as we walked through that situation, while I could only see little bits and pieces of it, God saw the whole thing. So my only job and responsibility was to be his guy, number one, as much as I possibly could be, to make the best decisions as I could with the information that was available, to guide and strengthen my family based on his principles and his knowledge of what the world is like, and what is to be expected from life and all of that. But it's because I had his full view to be able to do that. I wasn't just limited to all that I could see. I was able to look at that situation through God's eyes the most that I could, because I knew he could see the whole thing, and because of that, I could trust him. And it helped me to navigate that situation and through that challenge in a really great way. And the same thing is true for every single one of us. We have a limited field of view on everything that we experience in this life, especially those challenges. And if we get too caught up on staring on that, we miss the big picture. We don't include God in that, we miss being able to be successful, because he's the one that sees that big picture. So again, the problem that we have as humans is our limited field of vision. And the problems that come our way often really feel much bigger than they really are. Let me show you what I mean. I want you to think back over the last 10 years or so to one of those big challenges that you might have faced in your life. Now, there's 3 things from this that I want you to get. I want you to notice these 3 things. Number 1, you had to actually think back to what that challenge might have been. And you probably have to dig even deeper to think and bring up some of the details of that challenge as well, right? Number 2, At the time you were going through that challenge, it more than likely felt absolutely catastrophic to you, and you had no idea how you were going to overcome that and how you were going to ever deal with that challenge. And then number three is you're sitting here right now, having dealt with that situation, dealt with that challenge, and you continue to live. Now you factor God into all of that and all those situations, guys, those challenges begin to look very, very different because of that. So listen, learning to put God's perspective into the challenges that we're facing each and every day in our lives is so important. Understanding that we have a limited field of view is so important, so that we can know that God sees everything else that we don't, and we can trust him through that process. And it enables us to give those challenges the treatment that they deserve and helps us to avoid failing those challenges in the long run. So listen, let's make sure that we're doing that. Let's remember the reality is I have a limited field of view on this situation. God sees the whole thing. I'm going to trust him. And because of that, I have a great opportunity and great chances at not failing at this challenge. Let's make sure that we're doing that.